Some days, I think that if we lose the climate battle, it'll be due in no small part to this defeatism among the comfortable in the global north. Rebecca Solnit on Doomers in The Guardian last year. A growing number of scientists now compare climate doomists with the climate deniers. Delita Clark in the Financial Times. These are examples of a form of climate hope discourse that I call doomism as denialism, one of three discourses I identify in this paper, alongside the energy transition is inevitable and the truth will scare the public into inaction. I argue that together, these discourses serve to mystify the real blockers of climate action by limiting the space of acceptable climate discourse, simultaneously valorizing capitalism's preferred but insufficient solutions and silencing critiques that call for more radical change. Seeding hope by asserting that the energy transition is inevitable is the most pervasive discourse, exemplified by the pairing of what we might broadly call bad climate news with facts and assertions meant to imply that fossil energy is on its way out. I'll give an example. Zeke Hausfather, a climate scientist, opened a recent New York Times op-ed by describing global temperatures as absolutely gobsmackingly bananas. The bulk of the article explains the scientific understanding of the recent acceleration of global heating. But in closing, Hausfather found it necessary to assert, quote, "There is some reason for cautious hope." What is it? The world is on the brink of a clean energy transition. He goes on to cite renewable investment figures and the falling cost of solar, bookending his science communication with assurances about capitalism's ability to resolve its ecological crisis. I don't have time to litigate this in detail here, but these assurances are, in concrete terms, baseless. Investment figures remain vastly below what they need to be to avoid catastrophic warming, and their recent acceleration is driven almost entirely by China alone. And as Brett Christophers recently argued, the low cost of solar and wind implies neither their rapid deployment nor the phase out of fossil fuels. The state of the energy transition remains far from sufficient for us not to worry about accelerating global heating. The last discourse is, in a sense, the absence of discourse. It is a form of censorship and self-censorship justified by the climate hope imperative. A long-form article in Grist on tipping points closed with an unusually clear elaboration of this. Quote, "Too much focus on tipping points could backfire. Tipping points are so scary that they could feed into a narrative of hopelessness." The authors obviously published this piece in spite of that, but it speaks to a broader phenomenon. Dr. James Hansen, for example, recently reported being censored by the editorial board of a major journal because of strong language about the impacts his research was describing. This form of censorship, self-imposed or otherwise, is part of a well-established trend in science towards, as Briss et al. Put it, erring on the side of least drama, or avoiding alarmism. The imperative to spread climate hope and avoid messages that could be construed as doomism adds a new factor driving this form of censorship. This kind of epistemic paternalism runs the risk of amplifying the far-right anti-climate politics currently on the rise in North America and Europe. These twinned imperatives for hope and against doomism are limiting the space of acceptable climate discourse, and as a result of climate politics, assurances about the inevitability of energy transition downplay the need for more radical transformations of society. Attacks on doomism, based on the assumed but never justified premise that it is seeding a nihilism so pervasive as to be politically significant, discredit and marginalize both scientific voices that express the seriousness of ecological crisis and political ones that link that seriousness to a call for radical transformation. The deliberate withholding of information compounds these issues. These discourses are creating the false sense that, as Greta Thunberg put it, things seem like we're moving in the right direction. We are told that communicators must engender climate hope to avoid disengagement. But these dominant formulations of hope drive exactly that. A radical and empowering climate hope must be one grounded in utopianism and the uplifting of already existing radical alternatives. It should be focused on visions of a different future grounded in climate justice, on proving by example that another world is possible. As Mike Davis put it, only a return to explicitly utopian thinking can clarify the minimum conditions for the preservation of human solidarity in the face of convergent planetary crises.